Hello and welcome to the Chatterbox Letters podcast. I'm going to be reading my very large chatter-like letter to my listeners. The book, aka Chatter Letter, is called Holes. I hope you will enjoy as I read Holes in audio format. I will be reading chapter by chapter so it will seem interesting as you are curious to know the whole story at its entirety. Introducing Holes by Louis Sachar. I will be reading chapter 14. Let me go ahead and get that ready so I can go ahead and read it to everyone. Here is chapter 14. That night as Stanley lay on his scratchy, smelly cot, he tried to figure out what he could have done differently. But there was nothing he could do. For once in his unlucky life, he was in the right place at the right time, and it still didn't help him. "You got it?" he asked X-ray the next morning at breakfast. X-ray looked at him with half-opened eyes behind his dirty glasses. "I don't know what you're talking about," he grumbled. "You know," said Stanley. "No, I don't know," X-ray snapped. "So just leave me alone, okay? I don't want to talk to you." Stanley didn't say another word. Mr. Sir marched the boys out to the lake, chewing sunflower seeds along the way and spitting out the shells. Excuse me, I'm getting a little messed up here. He scraped the ground with the boot heel to mark where each boy was supposed to dig. Stanley stamped down on the back of his blade of the shovel, piercing the hard, dry earth. He couldn't figure out why X-ray snapped at him. If he wasn't going to produce the tube, why didn't he make Stanley give it to him? Was he just going to keep it? The tube was gold in color, but Stanley didn't think it was real gold. The water truck came a little after sunrise. Stanley finished his last drop of water and stepped up to the hole. At the time of day, Stanley sometimes could see some distant hills on the mountain on the other side of the lake. They were only visible for a short while and would soon disappear behind a haze of heat and dirt. The truck stopped and a dust cloud drifted past it. X-ray took his place at the front of the line. Mr. Podansky filled his canteen. "Thanks, Mom," X-ray said. He didn't mention the tube. Mr. Podansky filled all the canteens, then climbed back into the cab of the pickup. He still had to bring water to Group F. Stanley could see them digging about 200 yards away. "Mr. Podansky," X-ray shouted from his hole. "Wait, Mr. Podansky, I think I might have found something." The boys all followed Mr. Podansky as he walked over to X-Ray's hole. Stanley could see the gold tube sticking out from some of that dirt at the end of X-Ray's shovel. Mr. Podansky examined it and looked a long look at its flat bottom. I think the warden is going to like this. Next page. Does X-Ray get off today? Asked Squid. Just keep digging until someone says otherwise. Mr. Podansky said, then he smiled. But if I were you, Rex, I wouldn't dig too hard. Stanley watched a cloud of dust move across the lake to the cabin beneath the trees. The boys in Group E were just going to have to wait. It didn't take too long for the pickup to return. Mr. Podansky stepped out of the cab. A tall woman with red hair stepped out of the passenger side. She looked even taller than she was since Stanley was down in his hole. She wore a black cowboy hat and black cowboy boots, which was studded with turquoise stones. The sleeves on her shirt were rolled up and her arms were covered with freckles, as was her face. She walked right up to X-Ray. This where you found it? Yes, ma'am. Your good work will be rewarded. She turned to Mr. Podansky. Drive X-Ray back to camp. Let him take a double shower and give him some clean clothes. But first, I want you to fill everyone's canteen. I filled them a little while ago. Mr. Podansky, the warden, stared hard at him. Excuse me, she said. Her voice was soft. I had just filled them, Rex. Excuse me, the warden said again. Did I ask you when you filled them? No, but it's just, excuse me. Mr. Podansky stopped talking, excuse me. The warden wiggled her finger for him to come to her. It's hot and it's only going to get hotter, she said. Now, these fine boys have been working hard. Don't you think it might be possible that they might be taking a drink since you filled their canteens? Mr. Podansky said nothing. The warden turned to Stanley. Caveman, will you come here, please? Stanley was surprised she knew his name. He never seen her until she stepped out of the truck. He didn't even know the warden was a woman. He nervously went towards her. Mr. Podansky and I have been having a discussion. Have you taken a drink since Mr. Podansky filled your canteen? Stanley didn't want to come or cause any trouble for Mr. Podansky. I still got plenty left, he said. Excuse me. He stopped. Yeah, I drank some. Thank you. May I see your canteen, please? Stanley handed it to her. Her fingernails were painted dark red. She greatly shook the canteen, letting the water swish inside of the plastic container. Excuse me. Do you hear the empty spaces? She said. Yes, said Mr. Podansky. Then fill it, she said. And the next time I tell you to do something, I expect you to do it without questioning my, let's see, next page, authority. If it's too much trouble for you to fill canteen, I'll give you a shovel. You can dig a hole and the caveman can fill your canteen. She turned back to Stanley. I don't think that would be too much trouble for you, would it? No, said Stanley. So what will it be? She asked Mr. Podansky. Do you want to fill the canteens or do you want to dig? I'll fill the canteens, said Mr. Podansky. Thank you. Wow, I see some great authority here. The warden happens to be a woman who seemed to have respect for the boys. My, I declare. And I always thought, so far in the story that the warden would be cruel. And the warden is not. She is wonderful to me. She told Mr. Podansky about those canteens and why they were filled with water. Oh, my. Okay, everyone. I would like for everyone to like, share, subscribe to my podcast. Hit that notification button to know once I go live. Ring that bell for updates on my podcast. If you have a chatter letter that you would like to send to me to broadcast on my podcast, please send your letter to the Chatterbox Letters Podcast, Post Office Box 5556, Lakeland, Florida 33807. You can write whatever you want to write about in your chatter letter. Please keep it clean, your words clear and discreet. Everyone, you guys, please send me that chatter letter, that first chatter letter. I will really, really appreciate it. All right, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. God bless and thank you.